Are we ready? Okay. Good morning, everybody. Come on, let's get this under control, please. We're going to get this show on the road. Welcome to the Place and Resources Overview Committee on the 7th of June. My name's Carol Jones. I'm chairing today. What we will do is that the officers attending for the overall agenda, we have John Selgren, who's our Executive Director of Place, Aidan Dunn, the Executive Director of Corporate Development, Jonathan Mayer, our Director of Legal and Democratic and Monitoring Officer, and Lindsay Watson, who is our Senior Democratic Services Officer. The officers will be introduced that are presenting each agenda item. Just remember the use of the microphones, and I've got this to read out, but... Oh, okay, sorry. The use of the microphones. Honestly, if you don't know how to use your microphones now, you haven't been here long enough. You need to be coming more often. Just make sure you press your microphone on when you want to speak and turn it off at the end. And for those people who might be listening in, unfortunately, there's a technical difficulty and we can't show the video. So sorry about that, but we are all here and present. So moving on, item 1, apologies.
Chairman, today we have apologies from councillors Coombs, Rowe and Tarr.
Thank you very much. Item number 2, the minutes of the last meeting. I just wanted to check on that because on the last meeting, on the 20 mile an hour issue that we were discussing, I did ask that I wanted to make sure that we sent, when we have the new report, that the new draft report, before it comes to committee, it goes to all of the people that were here making comments and representing their case, and I wanted them to have at least a week to read it before the committee. So if we can insert that, is that okay? I'm just going to assume that's okay. On that basis, is everybody happy and agreeable for the minutes to be signed for the last meeting? Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? I see none. Chairman's update. We haven't yet been able to meet with the task and finish group for the 20 mile an hour policy. That needs to be chased through, which I will do. So it's unlikely that's going to come to the July meeting. The only other thing I've got to say is just remember that I do like Radio 4's Just a Minute, which means no deviation, no repetition, but if you like, we can have a little bit of hesitancy. Public participation. Have we got any questions, Lindsay?
No questions, Chairman.
Thank you. Questions from members?
No questions from councillors, Chairman.
Perfect. Okay, we move to item number 7, which is our modern slavery transparency statement. This is going to be presented by Dawn Adams. Over to you, Dawn. Thank you.
Hello, it's Dawn Adams, Service Manager of Commercial and Procurement. A forthcoming legislative change to the Modern Slavery Act will result in a mandatory requirement for all local authorities with a budget of 36 million and above to publish a modern slavery transparency statement on an annual basis. This report submits the proposed Dorset Council statement for financial year 21-22. The committee is asked to consider the contents of this report and recommend a proposed statement to Cabinet.
Lovely. Thank you very much. That was super quick. This seems really straightforward. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to know about this? On that basis, are you happy that we move the recommendation as set out that we've considered this report and we are proposing the modern slavery transparency statement to Cabinet for their 26th of July? Oh, sorry.
So I meant to check if it was in there. Have we in this policy when it's going to be reviewed? It's now a statement, so we'll have to come back each year. That's really helpful, thank you, because with new policies and statements, it's helpful to know that we're going to review at least once thoroughly to make sure it's bedded in properly. So thank you very much.
Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Chair. Dawn, this is a well-worded policy, which I think is really good and way forward. one of the bugbears for me is when links are to individuals. So you have individuals responsible thing. I've seen a response from Andy Frost, but perhaps you'd like to cover that. How can we make sure that if anybody, a member of the team dealing with such issues, is off on leave, on sick or away or leaves for whatever reason, that all the communications will be picked up and followed through?
So this regarding the actually community safety's web page, and there's external agencies named on there which are there to help. I'll take up the team again and go back to the external agency and see if they can give us a generic contact so it still has the same function, but it covers your point you made. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are you happy that we move and propose the... Sorry, I beg your pardon. Councillor Alford.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm on track with where we are. We're on the modern slavery policy, that's right. I've got a couple of little points to make. One is on paragraph 2.1, and it uses this expression, recognises the role it can play. Now, I pick up the word can, because on the lines of it being rather a weak word. And it doesn't say we will do or anything like that. So I just wonder if we need a stronger commitment to doing what is necessary than just the word can.
Thank you. Dawn, did you want to come back on that?
Certainly, we can actually firm that up. And this is our first statement for review, so this is the point of actually coming and picking up these points. If you want it stronger, we can make it a change accordingly. Yeah, if that's supported.
Must. What would you recommend? To must or should or must? Okay, must. You happy with must? Have I missed anybody? Oh, yes, Councillor.
I'm sorry, I've got another point. Paragraph 8.1. And paragraph 8 is about well-being and health implications. And it seems to me that this whole policy is essentially about well-being. Well-being is the crucial output or outcome of what we're trying to achieve here. So although I can understand the thought that writing reports has a low level of risk or implications, I don't feel the same way. I feel that this whole task of work is about creating well-being where there isn't. So I just wonder if there is something there that needs to be considered.
Yes, we can actually reflect that how this policy is going to support well-being and health implications and change the wording accordingly to actually reflect what you said.
Thank you. Aidan.
If I could just supplement Dawn for a second. Aidan Dunn, Executive Director for Corporate Development. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Well-being of our staff versus well-being of the wider community and all of those that perhaps are at risk of slavery. So as Dawn says, I think we can sort of just untangle that a little bit. I think this policy itself, I would suggest that we're at low risk in terms of our direct employment of modern slavery, but it's our wider supply chain that Dawn's illustrated in the report that's interesting. And just a very simple example, as Dawn says in the report, we spend about 50%, 51% of our budget is on external suppliers. And some of our supply chains are, very sort of a long way away from us. And so it's their well-being that I think we can try and sort of get into that paragraph as well. So we can tighten up on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you feel that you want to just reword that for it to, in any shape or form, before it goes through as a recommendation? What would your advice be, Dawn?
Just I reword it and send it back through to make sure everybody's happy with that change because it'll run through. So I'll do that. Thank you.
That, Councillor Alford. Okay, thank you. Well, on that basis, I'll assume that's what we'll do. Oh, yeah, Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chairman. Jill Haynes, I hold the portfolio for corporate development and transformation, and this paper comes in my name. I would say that obviously this is going to go to the other overview committee as well, because crosses right across the council. I wouldn't really want to hold that up. So I think if we could approve with Dawn bringing those changes, and we'll bring those changes to the next committee at the end of the month.
I think that sounds like a plan. Sorry, Councillor Fry is just asking if there's a reputational risk for Dorset Council. Would there be?
I'm looking in particular of any of the suppliers that we might use, picking up Aidan's point down the line. If we don't deal with them or we don't identify them, is there a reputational risk for Dorset Council if one of its suppliers is found to be using modern slavery techniques? Is the way I'm looking at that.
Well, yes, it would be, because obviously it's an act. That's the reason why we have checks in our procurement as it is. What this does, it takes it one step further for us, and this is why local government associations asked local authorities to actually step up and do their statement now, even if it's not mandatory, to highlight the importance of actually looking for new supply chains. So it's used around commodities, so we do try and do due diligence within the supply chain as much as we possibly can.
Thanks, Lord. Should that be recognised or documented within the policy somewhere? Come back if you don't agree. I'm happy, to push back.
I think if we actually have something in a statement, but Richard, better consider it and come back. No.
Can I just jump in? The statement itself, I think, is other than minor wording, it feels to me it sort of sets the tone of what we're trying to achieve. And then within the statement, we talk about our commercial policy and our commercial strategy. And as part of that, it does go into a bit more detail around how we do investigate our supply chains, make sure that they're legitimate and that they comply with the Modern Slavery Act. Although we do use the word carefully about keeping it proportionate, depending on the size of the contract and the scale of the contract. So my view would be that the statement itself is fine, other than the tweaks to the words that we've suggested. And if we could do those and take them to the next committee, to the other overview committee. But in terms of keeping on top of the supply chain, I think that's within our commercial strategy, and I'm comfortable that's suitably covered. Thanks.
Fine, thank you.
Okay, can we leave this then sorry, where's Jonathan?
Yeah, good morning, members. Jonathan Mayer, Director of Legal and Democratic. I think Councillor Fry makes a really important point. So modern slavery is a real scourge, absolutely horrible that people can be put into those situations. There would be damage to our reputation if it became apparent that we were contracting. We had in our supply chain suppliers who were using modern slavery. That would damage our reputation. But I think it's something that this is aimed at bringing into the light and stopping from happening. So I think, yes, it would damage our reputation if we found it, but it's something that does need to be brought into the light so that it can actually be stopped then.
Thank you. Okay, I see no more hands. On that basis, if Dawn, if you just rewrite or tweak those areas and it goes back to Jill, and then it will then go to people and health. Is everybody happy with that? Fine, thank you. Right, we come on to our item 8, which is the refreshed council plan. Now, this is really important. I know you'll all know this because this is going to sort of focus everything that we do and where we go in every committee, in everything that we do. Can I just, I know this will be presented shortly, but Councillor Flower, did you want to actually speak to this before we start on this, or would you prefer it's presented first?
I'm quite happy for it to be presented first, Chairman. I'm really here just to pick up any questions or comments that might occur where people need an answer.
Thank you very much. This is being presented by Deborah Smart.
Good morning, I'm Deborah Smart. I'm Corporate Director for Transformation, Innovation and Digital. And we have in front of us today the refreshed council plan. This has been refreshed specifically to ensure that we're reflecting and describing clear targets for the next 2 years of the Council, and that we can then monitor success through a single delivery plan, which is Appendix B, and link that in through our strategic performance monitoring. We welcome all comments on the report, but in particular, we're looking for the 2 overview committees to consider whether the change to the 5 proposed priorities accurately reflect the leadership mission statement presented by Councillor Flower at last month's annual council meeting. Some specific thoughts on wording. For example, should a more modern customer-focused council be just changed to a customer-focused council, or indeed anything else? Members have asked for their thoughts on the best format for presenting the priorities. So up until now, we've had the kind of wheel, and now we've got the kind of potential for carrying on with the wheel, or the kind of cross-cutting arrangement. So really welcome thoughts on that. And then again, just reflecting on the previous council plans have not had alongside them this specific delivery plan with specific targets that then we can build into monitoring our transformation and making sure we deliver it. So thoughts on that approach, and indeed, if there are targets there that are missing, please let us know. We'll see if we can take those back and reflect those. So the report is attached at Appendix A, and as I say, the delivery plan at Appendix B, and welcome all comments and thoughts.
Thank you very much. We've got quite a lot to go through, so I thought what we would do is that we would go through page by page with Appendix A to start with. So the first couple of pages really just give us the background, which is all quite straightforward. So if we can go to Appendix A on page 5 and just start there, would anybody like to come in with any thoughts or comments of anything that is down on page 5 to start with? Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention that this is actually a real change in the way that we are starting to work. So we've always been a bit knee-jerk with our plan. We've created a council plan, but it hasn't really had a very long-reaching view as to where we wanted to get to and what we want to do. And we all know that it's quite difficult to achieve what you want in just a 4 or 5 year period. So what we're starting to do here is to look much further into the future as to what we want Dorset to look like, what are our priorities going forward. And I think that is the big change about this plan. So while the plan actually talks about the last 2 years of this council, it actually projects a lot further than that. That is how we're working in our transformation mode, to actually ensure that the building blocks are in place to ensure we get to where we want to in 5 or 10 years' time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jesperson.
Madam Chairman, I have a remark, a point to make on actually page 4. It's really a presentational. Oh, sorry, Councillor Sherry Jesperson, representing Hillforts and Upper Tarrants Ward. It's a presentational issue, but it might trip us up later. So we have our headings, our values, our behaviours, our equality objectives. And then at the bottom of this page, added in, we have our statement there about modern slavery, which reads very clearly as an afterthought. It would have be more powerful for me if it was presented in the same, with the same amount of force as the rest of our equalities objectives. I don't know quite how you will do that with wanting to explain in that much detail, which I understand that you do, but it looks to me presentationally as if it's added in as an afterthought, which I understand that it was, because we're just bringing it here this morning. Could we go back and have another look at that? The reason it matters, first of all, because it doesn't carry the same weight as we would wish it to, but also then in 2 years' time when we edit the document, there's a danger that gets edited out because we've said that, and it's not got its own bullet point. I'll leave that thought with you. Thank you.
Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Councillor Jesperson. I think that's a really good point. And you can add into that, what about misogyny? What about crimes against women? I think they could all be wrapped up there in another heading there somewhere that is equally hard-hitting as those. But I accept the point completely that it looks a little bit of an afterthought on there. Thank you.
I think maybe that comment or point could perhaps come under our equality objectives. And I wonder whether the opposing modern slavery could actually become under a heading of principles. Would that sound like it could work? Okay. Thank you. If that... Sorry.
Yes, not to prolong this, but I completely support what Councillor Fry is saying. Personally, I don't like to see the way we treat women in the community and in the workforce treated as an equality issue. It's not an equality issue, simply it's a cultural issue. So could we give some thought to that? Don't just tuck misogyny and sexism in under equality, because it's much wider than that. It's about the whole culture of the organisation. Thank you.
Do you want to come back on that?
I was just going to say, clearly, of course, we've tried to keep as much of the plan as it was coming forward. So we have, as very obviously, just tucked this in at the bottom. But happy to take the comments on board and put it into the format we've got with the rest of the things as was, and see, taking on board whether we put them under principles and or culture. Yes, we can look at doing that so it's fully incorporated.
Perfect, thank you. If we go back to page 5, Councillor Orford.
Thank you. I think I'm still on page 4. And it's really a general remark, because I think philosophically what I like is for the council to be helping or supporting people, organisations and whatever to achieve their aspirations. It's an enabling thought rather than doing things for people. And in many respects, our values encompass that sort of approach, although I think they probably could be simplified. I think the problem with that approach, of course, is that people say it's not tangible, and that's an understandable remark. And I would like to see a plan being able to articulate how, for example, in 2 years' time, the council and residents will be different from what the way they are today. And if I could see that difference, then I would say, yes, there really is a plan there. It's a difficult challenge, I accept. And there's one other further remark I would make, and this covers the whole thing generally, and it's use of language. And there's a classic example. We talk about housing. Now, housing, it's understandable why we talk about housing, but it is a bureaucratic word, because the typical word that people will use are homes. And the use of words does present the character of the document that is being produced. And I would prefer something that is not bureaucratic rather than one that is.
Are you happy to take that on board, Deborah? Thank you. Does anybody else like to come in on page 4 at all? Did you want to comment on that at all, Deborah, or are you quite happy?
I'm just wondering if there are any suggestions, if we don't have housing, what we do have, because it's quite important, I think, isn't it, in the sense of what we need to do. I know it's a difficult one.
I think I deserve that remark. Maybe I'll give some more thought to it.
Housing tells it as it is, doesn't it? I understand people want a home, but housing tells it as it is. Right, if everybody's happy on page 4, I'm going to turn over very slowly to page 5. I just wanted to make a small comment on the bullet point 2, transforming the customer experience. I would really like to see in there to become a customer-focused council, and I don't know whether we can incorporate that so that it really encapsulates what we mean. Councillor Jesperson.
I absolutely support that, but transforming the customer experience is one of the most egregious pieces of council speak in here. If I didn't work for a council, I wouldn't have the remotest idea what that is meant to signify. We're just so used to our own language, aren't we? You know, it's transforming what it's like to do business with, or transforming what it's like to, I was going to say interact, that's worse, with your council. I'll give it some thought, but yes.
Okay, if we can put customer focus, definitely. The customer is the focus and the centre point of everything. Councillor Starr.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just suggest putting I think you just said it already, rather than customer experience, putting the customers first is something that people can easily understand. Yeah, I agree about the experience thing. It's a bit sort of wishy-washy, isn't it? Thank you.
I think that when we actually come to the delivery plan, we can delve a little bit further into what we might do to do that. So that's well made. Thank you. Councillor Meadows.
That's the first time. Well thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment on that because this comes under my portfolio, and one of the ambitions that we have got is that the customer is always first. So I'm comfortable with changes that reflect that. You know, we are quite far down our route of making sure that our customers do have the best experience. Yes, that means something to us, but I would support putting the customer first. It's interesting, isn't it? We talk about customers because we're providing services to them, but would they see themselves as customers or residents? It's a difficult one, but if we put residents, some residents, they're all our customers, but they may not all interact with us as customers. So I'll support anything that says put the customer first, because that's what we want to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to come in on anything else on page 5 at the moment? Right, I'm going to move over. Councillor Jesperson.
Again, the word of the Dorset Council estate. Council speak. Dorset Council's property and assets even. Estate, most people, estate is what you deal with when you die or when you're very, very rich.
Point taken. Okay. I'm now turning the page to page 6. Our priorities for Dorset. We actually need to bring in page 7 as well there, because we have the 2 diagrams. Personally, I have no strong feelings either way, but would anybody like to come in on pages 6 and 7 with how this is presented? Councillor Alford.
Thank you. I suppose I accept that we have to have these kind of charts. But I will express a preference for the first chart on page 6, because it's got the link to supporting people and places and whatever, which is something additional, something more than is presented by the circular sheet chart.
Thoughts? Anybody? Councillor Fry, I see your finger is hovering. It's hovering over the microphone. Anybody else want to come in at this point? Councillor Jesperson.
The first diagram goes somewhere. I mean, these things are so difficult to represent, aren't they, visually? But it does attempt to represent the interoperability of these services, and that's so central to our lives, isn't it? So I prefer the first one to the second for that reason.
Okay. Councillor Fry says he's not bothered. I personally do. I do quite like the fact that the creating stronger and healthy communities and becoming a customer focused actually rides across them all. So if everybody is happy, do we want to ask Deborah to take that away and that's the one we'll go with, or anybody want anything to say on that one? Right, we're moving on.
Come along there, looking at the page 6, where we've got the COVID response, the war in Ukraine and the cost of living. Should we have something in there about Brexit, the impact on our local business with bureaucracy? Will that be a factor in what happens in Dorset over the next couple of years?
Deborah, what are your thoughts?
We can add that in. I think really what we're trying to represent is, of course, we're setting out the plan to deliver things, but things do come in unexpectedly that we have to then dedicate resources to. And these are obviously the most kind of recent examples of that.
Fair play. Councillor Jesperson.
Having listened at some length over the weekend to I think it's called the Accounts and Audit Select Committee, when they were quizzing the senior people from the Bank of England, and the question of the impact of Brexit on the economy came up. And they were very, very clear, which I found interesting, that it was almost impossible. The question was asked, why have they, in their report, not said more about the impact of Brexit? And they said it was almost impossible to disengage the impact of the pandemic and other things that were going with the impact of Brexit. So I would advise we shouldn't put Brexit in there because we wouldn't be able to evidence it. So we're just adding words for the sake of it, and quite controversial words of that. So based on the fact that the Bank of England are not able to do this in their report to the Select Committee, I think that gets us off the hook.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Pothcray.
Thank you. Councillor Val Pothcray, Gillingham. I was just looking at the becoming a more modern customer-focused council. I wondered whether it wouldn't be more appropriate to say becoming a more forward-thinking customer-focused council.
Encapsulating the customer focus as well. Yes. Okay, Councillor Starr.
Given that it may be hard to disentangle COVID-19 from Brexit, is it reasonable to mention one and not the other?
Councillor Beddoes.
Thank you, Chair. I know I'm not on the committee, but I thought I might offer a bit of insight because I sit on all three of those recovery groups. The Ukraine Dorset Together work that we do with our communities, the Dorset Together work that we do with and have done with the pandemic response, and also sitting on the cost of living crisis working group. I would say Brexit will undoubtedly have an impact on our businesses and possibly our residents. But the difference for the purposes of this document is that we're not leading a response group on it. And so maybe that it's really that basic. This is something that we're leading because we can see directly the impact on our communities, these three pieces of work. But we don't, as far as I know, have a cross-partnership sort of community response group to Brexit. And therefore, maybe that's just the difference for the document. Thank you.
I think that's a point well made. Thank you. Right. We're going to move on now to page 8, which is protecting our climate and ecology. And I'm sure we've got a few. Councillor Alford, which page are you on? Should I turn back again?
I've probably gone back to the preceding one. I was just going to make a remark about the shocks that can be talked about. And we've mentioned COVID-19, Brexit and whatever. I personally think that we shouldn't mention any of them by name, simply because in the period of the plan, the biggest shock is likely to be inflation and unemployment, perhaps, things we don't know about. So I think better not to be too specific.
I think so, and also in time it becomes dated, I suppose, but actually the cost of living right now is the thing that's taxing most people. Right,
Thank you, Chairman. Just a comment on page 6. A lot of my residents always ask me why we refer to them as customers. And I do wonder whether that's the right terminology on this particular instance, and whether we shouldn't be looking at the word customer being resident, because I think most people will understand exactly what we're trying to get at on that. And we are here to represent the residents. They're not our customers, in my view.
Thank you. That's a good point. We're all happy with that. Right. Residents, not customers. I'm going to try and turn the page now. We're on page 8, Climate and Ecology. Who would like to come in here? I've got a few points, but let's throw this open. Oh, my goodness. Right, I'm going to start. I'm just looking at the... did we actually have a baseline to start with on the little green graphs, which is a little bit faint on my paperwork here? But did we have a baseline but from which we started? And was that measured in 2019? I just want, because I actually wonder whether we should actually show where we started from to where we want to be, but actually showing where we actually started at. Deborah, do you know that? Or
Where we've had targets that have gone all the way through various plans, we have got those baselines where there've been performance measures that have been measured consistently through, so that we can monitor that progress. If we're introducing new targets in this delivery plan, it may be that we haven't measured them before, and it's about from now going forwards, and then into the future.
yeah, okay, good point. Councillor Tarr.
Although it mentions the first line about Dorset's environmental, accessing Dorset's environmental in a sustainable way, there's no mention about the positive that can come out of our environment in ecotourism, which I think is something we seem to be missing altogether. With what's going on in Poole Harbour, for example, is making news all around the country, certainly in wildlife. People are interested in wildlife and bird watching, for example. But I think it's something that we can exploit, if you like. We can make more of our environment, but rather than just saying that we're going to improve access.
Sorry, Chairman, I couldn't find a way of doing this discreetly. I don't know what it's like for people listening in outside the council chamber, but I'm afraid each time Councillor Starr speaks, because the microphone is over there, a long way away from him, I can't hear him at all. And I can hear everyone else, I'm afraid. Sorry, I couldn't find a way of discreetly saying that.
Okay, Councillor Apothecary.
Thank you, Chairman. It's obviously just me, but I'm a little bit confused by the statement, reverse the decline of our natural places by 2030. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Okay, Deborah, did you want to come in on this one?
Only to say that this will be directly from the climate and emergency strategy work to reverse the decline of our built environment due to other natural hazards that would have happened. So, for example, eutrophication might be an example of that. Just think off the top of my head, but those kind of statements would have reflected where we've got other strategies, we've brought those forward into these priorities so that they align.
Just to come back, Chairman, our built environment, I understand, But our natural places doesn't mean too much to me.
And are we almost sort of admitting that we've allowed them to get into decline? Sorry, Deborah, are you looking perplexed here at the moment?
I'm certainly happy to look at that wording again and take that back, perhaps work with John. Oh, John, do you want to come in?
John Selgren?
John Selgren, Executive Director for Place. Chairman, if I might, I think it's a very good question that Councillor Pothecky's raised. I think this is aimed at the point about sort of the way in which the natural environment succeeds in the way it does. And in fact, what we need to do, and a lot of our environmental services do just that, is actually through some man-made intervention, as it were, seek to restore and put back those natural habitats to a more sustainable condition. So it's a positive intervention in the management of the environment to ensure that the environment is providing the breadth of environmental sustainability. But I would accept, Chairman, that I do think perhaps we could word that a little more clearly.
I think restore sounds much nicer than reverse decline. Councillor Fry?
I think the wording that we're using in this policy needs to reflect who the audience is, who's going to be the people that are reading it. And I think some of the wording is council speak rather than constituent or members of the public speak.
Thank you. Councillor Haynes.
We're in a bit of a catch-22 sometimes, because actually the council speak is what we need in our plan on occasions, because that is how we have our plan to support grant applications, etc., and that within the system is how it's understood. So we are, as I say, in a bit of a catch-22, because if we don't use the right words, then the relevant government departments don't pick up on what we're talking about. So I'm actually not 100% certain that our council plan is actually aimed at our residents. I think it's possibly aimed at a different audience, and that somewhere along the lines, the action plan is rather more what we're aiming at as the audience for our residents.
Councillor Flowers, did you want to come in here?
Just on that point, this is where comms come in, because where they change the officer speak, the council speak into a language that the general public appreciate and put it in a context of what the policy does for people. So I think there's a key role in that respect, and I do agree with the point was made that this is written, it's like lawyers write contracts, so lawyers understand it. We're writing stuff that others that are not in this chamber appreciate what we're trying to achieve, that are in the same environment of local government and national government. So I think it's very important that we get our comms right, that we wrap around some of the key things that we're out to achieve by getting that message out in a clear way that everybody in the communities do understand it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jesperson. Councillor Alford first, thank you.
Thank you. I recognise the point that any document needs to recognise its audience and cater properly for it. And in some ways, the point I was going to raise on page 8 and following is essentially the same sort of thing, because we have a mixture there of graphics and text. Now, I accept that there will be many people who just prefer to read the graphics. So maybe the graphics pages are the ones that they will go to first. I'm very much doubt whether mixing the graphics with the text serves anyone at all well. So I think a graphics section for those who like that sort of thing would go down very well.
Councillor Jesperson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I'm not seeing in this section is reference to the built environment. So we've said, the first line is, we will improve access to and use of Dorset's environment. Because this came under the heading Protected Our Climate and Ecology, I read that as meaning our natural environment in a sustainable way. And then it goes on to talk about becoming carbon neutral and so on. What's missing for me in this section is a line about and you'll know where I'm coming from the point of view of planning here, a line about the future built environment. So we've talked about becoming carbon neutral, which references the buildings we already have and the buildings Dorset already has, but there's nothing in there that specifically refers to the buildings that Dorset is going to build going forward, which is planning. And that's probably because this came out of the climate and ecology document, and the local plan sits beside that, but it's not the same document. There's nothing we can do about that. Could you just go back and see what you might put in there, a line or two that makes that link between not what exists only at the moment, but what we are going to be responsible for allowing to be built going forward, and how that links into protecting our climate and ecology. Thank you.
Do you not think that would come into the delivery plan?
I hope it will. I think it should be here as well as a key principle as well for me. Yeah.
I'm going to leave that one with Deborah because I think that's a delivery action that we would take as a council. Would anybody else like to come in under this section? Right. I'm moving on. Councillor Alford, I'm moving over the page. Right, we're on creating stronger, healthier communities. Okay, there's quite a few areas here. Would anybody like to start or come in on anything on page 9 at the moment? I know you would. You didn't you?
I know it's a very well-used, Councillor Jesperson, I know it's a very well-used graphic, but I do, every time I see it on our roadsides or anywhere else, I do flinch at a graphic involving a bent-over old person with a walking stick. I know this is referring to the over 80s, but most of the over 80s I know don't look like that at all. Could we find a more modern graphic that represents older people than a bent-over old person with a walking stick? Thank you.
That on the first paragraph where we've got collaboration between public services, community leaders and residents, I would like to see voluntary groups in there as well. And I also feel that we should actually have a metric on include a metric on food poverty, and we can measure that quite easily with numbers of people needing food banks and pantries. But I think that has to come under this section here. Would anybody else like to come in on anything here at the moment? Okay, I also, then I'm going to carry on. I'm looking at the paragraph, third from the bottom, local council budgets. And where we've got communities to help themselves, I wonder whether we could put in something like enable and support voluntary and charitable organisations who can demonstrate an effectiveness and impact to actually do more to support those people that will help us in our efforts here. I don't have anything else on this page. Does anybody else? Deborah, did you want to come back on anything?
I was just going to say we could add a couple of sentences after that, communities to help themselves through, and then give some specific examples, as you said. That will cover that off, I think.
Just to say, Madam Chair, that I think this page gives an even better example of the graphics and the text not sitting well together than the last one.
I think that's a personal view, isn't it? Personally, I don't mind it at all. I think that they link, but I'm happy to take advice or be led by the majority.
I quite like the graphics, and I think a lot of people will look at the graphics first and ignore all the script, and others, you've got your choice there. So I'm comfortable with them.
Right, I'm turning over. We're on page 10. Sustainable development and housing.
This linking in is a previous comment that I've made, linking in with our climate change stuff. I don't see anything. I'm picking up on what Councillor Jesperson said earlier. One of the things I'm very passionate about is how we as a council can direct others to help us look after our climate and the things. What I don't see anything here is, I know it's a government-led thing to getting developers to do renewables on new developments, but it's a chicken and egg situation, and I feel we should have something in here, some form of wording that I know we can't back it up with law, but it's that chicken and egg situation. If we want the government to bring in legislation to make them do stuff, somehow we should be showing that we demonstrate that we want that in here. Do we want solar panels? Do we want water recycled and reused? And so on and so on. I just think that we're missing a chance here, whether it's under climate change or sustainable development, because what is sustainable development? It's still creating carbon.
Okay, John Selgren.
Thank you, Chairman. John Selgren, Executive Director of Place. I think Councillor Fry makes a good point, indeed, to pick up the point made by Councillor Jesperson in the earlier part of that conversation. Certainly, I know if Councillor Walsh is here, and many of you, of course, who sit on planning committees know only too well that the sort of prevailing view is probably one of the most powerful tools that a council has to support the sustainability agenda is as a planning authority. So I think, Chairman, with your agreements, I think it would be helpful if that is woven carefully into the narrative as part of the feedback you've brought from this committee discussion this morning, because it is a very, very valid point.
I think that would certainly make everybody on a planning committee quite happy, because we're always asking. The other metric, which I don't see in here, is how we monitor the responsiveness of our housing providers, our registered housing providers, in dealing with issues and complaints, because sometimes it's just an uphill battle trying to get some of the most basic repairs and renewals carried out. I don't know whether we can weave something in about actually monitoring and holding them to account and just sitting on them a little bit harder than we actually do. Would anybody else like to come in? John, you're looking perplexed.
No charge, just looking to see if any members wish to come in first. So recognising as a member-led council, I would obviously want to offer members the chance to comment on that. Many of you, of course, who work very closely with our registered providers. In the main, of course, we're very fortunate in Dorset in having a very strong range of providers. But I accept your point, Chairman, certainly the work that I do with my colleague Andrew Bilney in housing and in the adults service. We talk about this issue a lot and quite significantly. I think one of the tools I'd perhaps reflect to members that you've got is perhaps to use your scrutiny function as a way to do that, because we know this is an issue which I'm sure fills your post bags as local members on a very regular basis. We know that the RPs have their systems for escalation and complaints and so on, but I think from time to time where perhaps things are falling behind what you would wish to see delivered in this community, then it would be quite legitimate for the council to be exercising the scrutiny function as a way of having that leverage over our registered provider partners.
Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Chair. We talk about here about average property prices. We talk about property types. What we don't talk about, and what we've seen in the press in the last day or so, is the amount of properties available for rent. Some of our communities will need rental properties, and should that be something that we're looking at as we go forward, whether that's private or social housing, because I understand the recent numbers of private landlords has decreased as they're capitalising on the market there, and that's going to hit the people, the housing stock available for those who need that form of housing.
Councillor Jesperson.
Agree with that, and I would think that in the period of this plan, in fact, the withdrawal of private landlords from the private rented market is going to be more significant, is likely to be more significant than the change in work practices, which might even have peaked by now, people coming to Dorset to work from home. So I think, you know, if we're talking about what's a priority, I would think that's likely to be a higher priority, have a bigger impact. So I agree with Councillor Fry, we need to at least be aware of it. because we've given a whole paragraph to new ways of working, which, as I say, might even have peaked by now.
Councillor Fry.
Thank you, and I'm glad that point's been recognised. The other one that we seem to have a little bit of, if I call it a scourge, might be the inappropriate word, but holiday homes here in Dorset, because each holiday home is one house less or one property less for people to house our own people who need housing here. Is there something, should we have that recognised here, or is it appropriate?
I think we'll let Deborah come back on that one. Is it? I'm not sure that it comes in as it's part of our tourism, and we welcome holiday makers to Dorset. Deborah, what are your thoughts?
Certainly, I think we can incorporate the first point in that sort of second paragraph after the graphic to make it clearer that we'd also look at the provision of private rented sector and monitor that. And I think we could also think about I'm not sure what the measures we have currently are that look at what housing is taken up through tourism. So I'm happy to link in with my colleague Andrew Billany and look at whether we can monitor that and what that would do along with the relevant portfolio holder to see whether we can add something in there. We certainly can comment on it because I think it is going to be a fact that housing will be taken up through Airbnb and other methods in Dorset that is at the moment not regulated.
Councillor Jesperson.
A small matter of language. If we are going to make any comment on second homes, can we be sure to make the distinction between holiday homes, which are let to holiday makers, and second homes, which are a different thing, because I think they have a different influence in the economy, and I think we shouldn't lump them all together because that's not accurate.
Good point. Thank you very much. Councillor Alford.
I will suggest that there is a level of detail here which is too far for the plan. When I spoke earlier on, I suggested an aspiration to help people meet their own aspirations. And in some ways, if you have a global theme such as that, it covers the issue of housing or whether people can find homes to live or rent or whatever. So I think keep the plan strategic. I think avoid too deep a level of detail. And as I said earlier on, how will this council look different in 2 years' time? If we can answer that question, that could be, we could be making progress.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to come in and comment? Councillor Orwell.
Hello. Thank you, Chair. I think this point links very nicely with the next point, driving economic growth, because at the moment we've got 36% of people over 50 are employed in Dorset. And if we don't start doing something about the housing issue, we're not going to have a sustainable county, let alone anything else, due to the fact that the young people are leaving the county in droves. So I'm just wondering what we need to build into the plan to try and avoid that happening, because 20 years' time, what are we going to look like with nobody to service our public sector in things like home care, etc. So I'm just really concerned that that links in with the next situation. Cheers.
I wonder then whether the second paragraph from the bottom develops its bold long-term vision. We actually just bring something in there to recognise the emerging needs of the population, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. Thank you. Right. If we're happy there, I'm moving on. We are now on driving economic growth. Would anybody like to come in on this page at this moment? Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. I can't believe how many times I've read this in the process of bringing this through to committees. And then suddenly you get it in front of you, think, oh my goodness, that's not right really, is it? So we actually don't deliver the economic growth. We help with it. We support it. but actually it's a question of, it's not going to go away, is it? No. It's a question, business does that for us. The LEP might support it with it, but actually us as a council. So it says we will deliver sustainable economic growth. I don't think that's a promise that we can make. I think we can say we will support sustainable economic growth. Now, a leader might have a different view on that topic. And then my other comment on that is it looks like it's only men that work. Because when you look at the graphics, there ain't no women there working, which also I find a bit offensive. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, we can certainly bring the word enable in here, I guess. And there isn't actually a metric here on anything to do with transport, because transport is key to getting into the next town or beyond to get the job of your dreams and so on and so forth. So I wonder whether we can include something on transport. Councillor Jesperson.
Just to go back to Councillor Haynes' point, which is very well made. We don't deliver, but could we aim to do something slightly more than enable? In other words, surely our role here is to there was a phrase we used earlier about our actions and decisions, that we will take actions and take decisions that will enable, so which is rather more proactive than just being pro-business. We will do stuff that supports that. Could that be a wording?
I think that sounds good. I quite like the word drive, to actually drive forward a plan to Thank you. Would anybody else like, Councillor Alford?
Yes, I was just going to suggest that catalyst is a useful word.
Okay, if we can get drive and catalyst. Councillor Flowers.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We often use the word economic growth, but actually it's prosperity that we should be focusing our minds on, not growth in itself. It's the prosperity that any economic activity has to the benefit of the people of Dorset. And it's certainly something that I'm going to be pushing hard on in getting away from growth and talking more about prosperity, certainly through the LEP and other areas.
Absolutely. I think you've got your work cut out, haven't you? Would anybody else like to come in on this section? Okay, let's move on. Becoming a more modern, customer-focused council. Okay, who'd like to kick off here? Sherry, you haven't got your hand up yet, but I'm sure you're going to get it up any minute now. Oh, Councillor Apothecary. Yes, did you want to speak? No? No, I beg your pardon. You're just... Okay.
I don't think it contributes anything to this concept, that's all. I know what we mean, and we used it back in 2019 when we really weren't very modern. But yeah, I don't think it needs it. We could be forward focused, forward facing, or whatever, but modern is a bit redundant.
Yeah, I think modern does sound a little bit outdated, doesn't it? Councillor Fry, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I'd just like the word, I think it was picked up earlier by Councillor Bryan, about we should say a resident-focused council, perhaps. Being a more resident-focused council.
Do you like the words forward-thinking? Right, come in.
Mic on somewhere. Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to refer back to my original comment about residents, because I was very negligent in not mentioning the businesses that play such an important part in this county. So I'd like to potentially revert back and say residents and businesses, or at least bring businesses into it. And again, looking at the Appendix A that we're looking at the moment, there's no mention of the businesses in this, and I think this needs to be introduced throughout the paper and becomes very inclusive of the business community, because we rely so heavily on them for the future growth. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So do you feel that we could perhaps go with something like becoming a forward-thinking resident and business council, or something along? Will you play with those, Deborah? Yes, yeah. Okay, Councillor Alford.
I would just like to suggest I'd prefer something a bit more active than forward-thinking.
Like, would you like to make a suggestion? Deborah, would you like to come in, or?
I was just going to come in around visitors, because if we say residents and businesses, we've just been thinking about tourism, and they are customers of ours, obviously periodically when they come to Dorset. So I was just wondering whether we can amplify businesses through the paper, but wonder whether we use residents and customers to then cover businesses that buy services from us and take services from us, and also visitors, because I wouldn't want us to lose the visitors when we're thinking about making specific actions to make it easy to come have a wonderful holiday in Dorset. Don't know.
Radical, but we could use the word people.
Councillor Beddoe.
Sherry got there first, but my suggestion could be becoming a more responsive, people-focused council.
I think you got it in one. Anybody? Councillor Starr.
You go first.
This whole page, Chair. This whole page really is manna from heaven for anyone 30 or below. But it's going to be a bit scary for some of our older residents that are not online and are not savvy and a bit scared of modern technology. So we need to still be open and to state that we'll still be open to those people that cannot, if you like, move with the times.
Absolutely. Councillor Flower, did you want to come in here?
Strikes me that this becoming a more modern customer-focused council looks like 2 years ago, when we've done a lot of work since then, and I don't think that the heading reflects where we are today, where we want to be tomorrow. So I think the heading needs picking up, not trying to tweak it, but rethink about what it ought to say. And I'm not quite sure what we've got this morning, Chairman, is exactly what we want it to say, because becoming more modern, so what we've been doing for 2 years then. And I think that it doesn't send the right message about it. If we're going to tweak this and update it, we need to reflect where we are in the progress we've made since we became this council. Just a thought. I haven't got a clue, an answer for you, but
I think Councillor Beddoe had something pretty good. Do you want to just come back out with what you said again and just see how that sits?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just reflecting on that. Absolutely take the point about digital exclusion. It's really, really important that people aren't excluded. And I think the key line in there is we want residents to be able to access the information and support they need quickly and easily via the means that are most suited to them, including a consistent digital offer. So we know that a lot of people will want that consistency of, I'll just nip online and report it or get the, but a lot of people won't. And so that's why we've specifically included that are most suited to them. We know some people will always prefer to pick up the phone, and that's absolutely fine. That needs to be a consistent offer too. So I just wanted to make that point. I think the becoming a more whatever, we've tried to reflect the motion and the action with the use of becoming rather than, this is what we would like to do. It's the use of becoming that we're constantly trying to improve. So the suggestion that I previously made was becoming a more responsive, people-focused council. I think the point that people have made today is around when we share this with our residents, you know, what would they want to recognise? And this is one of the sections where perhaps, going to Councillor Haynes' point, we don't have to use that speak because, you know, we're perhaps, this is all about our people. It's not about the grants or whatever. And I think that people would recognise that, because what are our customers, our people, our residents, our visitors, our businesses, what are they looking for from us? They're looking for responsiveness and agility. So, you know, that would still be my 6 eggs worth. Thank you.
So I think we are there with becoming a responsive, people-focused council. Do you feel that meets? Yeah, you happy? Everybody? Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. We've gone through Appendix A. We're now going to hit Appendix B. And I thought the way we would do this is we would take each theme one at a time. So we are starting with protecting our climate and ecology. So we've got, there's a lot more work to go into this delivery plan, as I spoke to Deborah about, so we don't need to worry about the X% or whatever. This is just the beginning of a process. It's really a case of, have we missed anything? Is anything not relevant? And is there anything people would like to tweak or add or feel that's missing? So let's go through protecting climate and ecology. Sorry, I just had a little something here in that, should we be mentioning the protecting or even expanding upon local species of plants, animals and insects as being part of our protecting our climate and ecology, or does that sort of encompass it all anyway? Councillor Hayne.
I'd like actually the views of the committee in this area, because while we have declared a climate and ecological emergency, from the point of view of the public, and when we've done our public surveys, it's actually the natural environment that's most important to the public. And actually, I'd like to have this as protecting our climate, ecology, and natural environment. And possibly add, as you've said already, Chair, some of those areas into that. And I just wondered what the rest of the committee felt on that, because it seems to me that that is rather more in the theme of where the public are coming from. And perhaps we need to get ourselves with what's important with them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to refer members to the strategy and action plan that we laid out in 26th of June 2020. There's a whole paragraph on natural assets that I should be giving an update to Cabinet on at the next Cabinet meeting. The paper is out at the moment for review, but I've read the paper that's come into Cabinet, and it does highlight the fantastic advances we've already made. But we do have a whole section on natural assets that is important to take into the context when we're looking at this particular paper.
Right, is there anything else that people would like to add in, take out, change? Councillor Alford.
I think essentially I have 2 remarks, and first is to follow up with 2 last comments, which is to say I totally agree with what is said. People's real concern is to maintain the natural environment and assets of, excuse me, of Dorset, and that is a fundamental reality, and we have to accept that. As for the content of these, delivery plans, there's a lot of detail there. And my suspicion is, especially if we're looking at the graphics version of the plan, You know, is it something that can be presented as a graphic? Might be a good way of saying, yes, that should be included, because a lot of people are interested in the graphics. And I think it needs to be looking at the big picture rather than delving into points of detail. We can do that. We can delve into the points of detail behind the scenes anyway. But I think anything where we are communicating with the public, you know, it's the big picture that's going to matter.
Councillor Jesperson.
Yes, going back to the point that was made earlier about protecting our natural environment, climate and ecology, and I'd like to see it in that order, given that the people are put environment first, and do that repeatedly. So the final bullet is all that refers to the natural environment, and it's not clear to me what it means, and it's not clear to me what we're managing, what we're measuring. So not now, but could somebody go back and look at that final bullet and say what, in addition to having more, because there's nothing in here that measures what success would look like for the natural environment. We've got what success would look like for climate change, for being more carbon reduction and so on, but we've nothing here about what success would look like for the natural environment. So can we just go back and it's bound to be all in Ray's report somewhere, but can we just weave it in? Thank you.
Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the 5th point from the bottom on the protecting our climate and ecology, where it says harbour processes have been improved to make it easier for visitors to access service consistently. That's looking back. If this plan is looking forward, is that wording appropriate there? It's saying, is that fair comment, Deborah?
Yeah, we can certainly take that away and say what it is we're improving towards. So harbour processes will be improved to, rather than that way around.
Thank you. Is there any way we can have as an aspiration, if you like, that the energy we produce in Dorset will actually stay in Dorset and benefit our own residents? Or because I would we got plenty of hot air here. Yeah, can we put that as an aspiration? Councillor Bryan, you're just looking so happy. Would you like to come in?
Yeah, appearances can be deceptive, let me tell you. It's something that's very close to my heart, as you're aware, and there's lots of discussions going on at the moment with different suppliers. Everybody's involved in it. Dawn is being very helpful on making whatever I suggest is legal. But it's always been the aim that all of Dorset Council's buildings will be generated with power that is produced in Dorset. The bigger ambition is to take that to the residents and businesses as much as we possibly can. So hopefully that highlights or says to you it is part of the plan, and there's actually a meeting later on this afternoon to discuss how we go about it.
How can we encapsulate that within here? Because that would be a great measurable outcome to have as part of what we want to achieve going forward. Can we get that in as a? I mean, yes, because we are a can-do council, aren't we, Deborah? Yes.
We are. I can check on the exact one. We could put something in about our aspiration for PPAs, which are power purchase agreements. So you can put those in place where you're generating electricity that then you can use that to support local residents. So we could put in our ambition where we generate is to secure PPAs. I'll take that offline, but Ray and I can work on that, get the wording exactly right.
Thank you. And are we looking at all at anything that will change the way we dispose of waste in a clean way? Is that anything that we can bring in, or is that completely outside of our ballpark? I'm looking at you, Ray.
I thought you might be. Although it doesn't come under my portfolio, it comes under Laura's waste. I have a big bee in my bonnet over the amount of waste we actually create, and I'm looking very hard at central government to actually come in with some form of legislation which restricts the amount of packaging we produce, because we all go shopping and we all end up with a lot of packaging that we have to dispose of, and this is all part of the waste programme. I only provide the fleet side that collects the waste, but Laura deals with the waste itself. But as I say, I have a bee in my bonnet about the amount of waste we create, and I'm guilty of it as well.
Councillor Beddoe, would you like to come in on that? Would you like to get another action point in here? You can.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a really good point, because we do have a huge amount of work going on within our waste strategy team. Of course, you've got the waste hierarchy, which is reduce, reuse, recycle. When we look at building new household recycling centres, there will be space there focused on things like repair cafes. We'll be extending the reuse areas, and we do a huge amount of education with schools and with community groups about how you can actually reduce and reuse before you recycle. Once you get to recycling, we're looking at, I'd have to look at the details, but we're looking at soft plastic trials, so the films that come on top of things. And you're right, we actually need to reduce what we're using in the first place. It goes as far as I went to a round table with a minister and said, actually, one of the things that central government could be doing is where you're designing, where you're looking at big companies that design, for example, affordable and social housing, build in proper waste recycle space to kitchens, things like that, because we're coming at it slightly wrong. We go in and say you can have this box or this bag or whatever. So yes, there is probably a space for something in that section around, we'll continue to do X, Y, Z, because we are already doing it. And it has some really good traction, but we know that behaviour change on a huge scale like that takes an awful lot of time. So I think it would probably be nice to have something in there, because yes, recycling is increased and that's good, and waste is decreased and that's good. But perhaps again, Deb and I can take that offline and work out just to insert something that says we'll continue to focus on reduce and reuse and recycle as a good but last resort. Thank you.
Thank you. And are there cleaner ways of disposing waste once it has been created that could be coming online or on track at all? Does anybody know? Okay, we'll leave that there, because it would just be good if we could keep that in mind. Tony, Councillor Orford.
Yes, just to go back to Councillor Bryan's point just now about packaging, you shouldn't forget the packaging tax.
I'm so sorry, Councillor Fry was taking my attention at the time and I missed that, Councillor Orford. I'm so sorry, I apologise.
Would you like me to repeat that? I was just giving a reminder about the packaging tax.
Thank you, Chair. Greenwashing, where companies, I've got some heads up, companies, finance companies, companies in the cities doing things in Dorset to solve their own carbon neutral situation. Is that something we should mention there? Do we support that, or is it relevant or not?
I am seeing a vagueness at the moment. Let them think about it. Okay. Okay, would anybody like to come in on anything else under this section? Right, we're moving on. Creating stronger, healthier communities. Councillor Jesperson.
Well, first of all, I have to start by saying this is really, really very impressive list, isn't it? I mean, this comes to the heart of part of what the council is here to deliver for people, and it's really very impressive. It's ambitious and it's comprehensive. So I was very pleased to read it, frankly. I think that it needs sharpening up for a couple of things. First of all, there's quite a lot of jargon in here with which the people who wrote it are very familiar. So there's reference to the mockingbird model, which a member of the public wouldn't know what that means. That's jargon. And then there's front door integration. Now, I know exactly what you mean by front door integration, but really, I'm not even sure it's English. So it really needs a really thorough look at to get all the jargon out of it. The other general point about it, this might not, this is just something that needs to be gone through with a fine-tooth comb. Lots of the points here are really very precise. X people will have completed the Live Well Dorset programmes. That's what I want to see, a measurable target. Some do not... So a reduction in the gap in education outcomes between the most... It would be lovely if some of that... Now, it may not be possible to put a number on that, but if there is, can we put a number on it? Even if it's... I don't want an over-ambitious number that we're going to fail against, but where there's numbers, it's very much more powerful. So the council has an effective prevent offer. What would an effective prevent offer actually look like? Because what are we actually measuring? Because you could argue that we have that already. It's just going to be better. So that's my general points about this. I mean, it's super stuff, but it just needs tightening up. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Flowers.
I'll be bold, Chairman, and refer colleagues back to the briefing summary, which talks about each overview committee is asked to focus on services in the areas that they have a remit for. Now, this section we're on now, a lot of this is in people and health. And there are some stuff in here that is place and resources, and I think we need to sort of cherry pick it, if I may suggest.
Point taken. I stand down, but I still would like a measure in here in the reduction in need of food banks and pantries. Actually, please, thank you. In which case... Sorry? Supporting the voluntary sector. Should we then, in which case, move away from this section if this is going through people and health? And we come then to creating sustainable development and housing. I actually wanted to include good quality in there somewhere. Would anybody like to come in on this section?
I think it's a job to say what is good quality. That's subjective, and we've all got a view on that. And how does the council say that you're a good developer and you're a rubbish one?
Well, we do, though.
We do, but I don't sure that we can document unless we want to start a list of developers that we support and those we don't. It'd be interesting for our leader to answer.
Would anybody else like to come in on anything under this section?
Can we include anything here on sustainable development, as in renewables, that we would like to see developers put in there as well, please? Across the board, and I use that word renewables because it should cover everything: water, electric.
John Selgrim.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, again, Councillor Fry makes a good point. I did the same sort of response as earlier, actually, that I think the scope to make sure that the planning policies reflect those aspirations, because Councillor Fry is quite right. Clearly, we can't have a policy that sort of names particular developers for their good quality or indifference. But nonetheless, we can, through the planning process, put policies into place which can, to the best of our ability, frame that in such a way that allows you, through the planning process, to direct development to sustainability and the better quality of built environment that you would like to see in Dorset.
Thank you. Councillor Flowers.
Sorry about this. When we come to, it says the first bullet point, Dorset Council working with government on radically new local plan. Well, it can't be new, really, because we haven't had one before. So can I suggest it says strategically based local plan, because that's what it is. Rather than being radical, it's going to be strategically based. And that fits very well in with the language I've been using with government. Thank you.
Front row here, so you're absolutely spot on there.
Can I be contentious? The point 2 there, the significant progress in developing a new garden town for Dorset, that might be contentious with some of the community around Dorchester. And looks as if it's a done deal.
Yeah, did you want to come back on that?
I mean, the terminology garden town is not wrong, but we talk about a new settlement in Dorset as opposed to specifically talking about garden town, because Les Fry's quite right. That is a label that's applied to one particular development that's ongoing, potential ongoing at the moment. So again, the language I've used with government is that we'd like to introduce a new settlement, a new town in Dorset to try and deal with all the issues around infrastructure and the actual development of that's more sustainable. So I'm not sure, it's not wrong, but I just don't think it reflects the language I've been using with government.
Okay, I can see Deborah making lots of notes. Councillor Jesperson.
There's a couple of points here. First of all, I absolutely agree with what Councillor Flower said about the local plan. So given that that's our starting point, some of the other points that we've made in by 2030 create 5,000 new homes in Dorset in the new settlement. I'm having trouble reading this because there's 3 or 4 points that refer to the local plan and planning, and they're all scattered all the way through. So could we gather them all up so they read in a consistent way? Because obviously how many new homes we created in Dorset and what percentage of affordable homes we delivered and so on depends on what we put in the local plan. So we're kind of, so we just need to, again, it just needs to be tidied up a little bit. And again, some of these things have target numbers against, and again, XX increase in the number of social housing built. Again, I think that's quite difficult to name until we've written a local plan, but some don't. Could we make a link between there are no children or families in B accommodation, and then the point above with about for those who are homeless and so on. So either there's none or we're having a reduction. So it's just a question of I appreciate this is a work in progress, so I'm not being critical, but it just needs, again, it's the tightening up the numbers, and if you could cluster the things that are about the local plan together so it reads in a more coherent way. Thank you.
Councillor Flowers.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The last bullet point about by 2030 create 5,000 new homes in a new settlement, I don't think we can put that in. I think that's being presumptuous. We have no idea what the timeline is or what the numbers of property will be until we've got the new local plan in draft form ready to go to the Secretary of State, and a schedule of work around that will be coming forward. So I'm not convinced that it doesn't add any value, that last paragraph. Again, it's not wrong, but I don't think it should be in there.
No, Deborah's nodding. It's gone. It's deleted. And can we have a measure in here anyway, just to keep on top of our registered providers to make sure that could it be some, I don't know, is there some measure that we can use to make sure that residents in social housing are being looked after properly or not? Councillor Flowers.
Sorry about dominating the proceedings at the moment. In one of the 10 key priorities, there's specific reference to building a strong relationship with our registered providers. And I know that's going on. I know officers are having dialogue. And they have been quite successful in the recent past. But I think it's very important that we don't just assume they're going to be successful, that we actually have a close relationship with them so that our aspirations around social housing development in Dorset reflects their ability to deliver. So I think there's an opportunity there for us, and it says it in one of the key priorities, for that piece of work to go on and for that dialogue to be developed. So I'm not sure it's measurable in as easy as it might sound, but I think the relationship, it will be built on.
Councillor Haynes and Councillor, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. On that very point, I think we also perhaps need to look and actually be a little more proactive ourselves, because we're not very swift at the moment in dealing with applications for housing. And I think that if we could actually ensure that within a year, or certainly within 2 years, that we're dealing with housing applications within a timely manner, because at the moment 14 weeks isn't a timely manner when you've got a 2-month eviction notice.
Can we put that in as a metric? Thank you. Councillor Fry, sorry.
Chair, I'm looking at the fourth bullet point down. We have built on our investment in council-owned temporary accommodation to substantially reduce the dependence on B&Bs for those who are homeless and need our support in the short term. We then have the next bullet point. There are no children or families in B&B, and it seems like we're setting ourselves up to fail, and that there are no children in B&Bs should be taken out altogether.
Yeah. Councillor Flower.
Yeah, the two are interrelated. Again, it's a line in the 10 key priorities that our aspiration is to have no families that find themselves homeless in a B&B accommodation. We want to create our own stock so that we can provide temporary accommodation for those that do find themselves homeless, so they don't have to rely on B&B. But I think I agree with Councillor Fry. I don't think that line needs to be in there at all.
John?
Thank you, Chairman. If I might, as we sort of move perhaps towards the conclusion of discussion of this part of the document, I think what I've taken away loud and clear is that the planning section and planning bullet points need to be brought together better and perhaps sequenced in such a way that actually gives members a narrative of what you're trying to achieve through the planning process. So I'm more than happy to work with Deb and colleagues in planning to do that, perhaps to give you something that's rather more coherent in the way that it describes your aspiration.
Sounds like a plan. Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The first line says Dorset Council is working with government on a radically new local plan. I'd like to see a link in there, if possible, which refers to the local transport plan as well. Everybody in this room is very aware of my passion and disappointment on the BSIP programme. And let me tell you, I have not given up on that, and we've been told to resubmit, which is good news. But I do think there needs to be a link between the local plan and the local transport plan, because they are absolutely joined at the hip.
Good, thank you. Councillor Pothecary.
Thank you. I think it's probably a typo. 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth bullet point down. It says proved Dorset Council owned temporary accommodation. I think it's probably supposed to be provide.
I can see Deborah nodding. Well spotted. Good spot. Okay. John.
I just come back and make the same point in relation to the housing things, although we don't have Andrew with us this morning. I'm more than happy to take away and discuss with him and Deb, because I think you get that same consistent narrative. Again, I've listened carefully to your discussion. Just my professional observation would be on, although laudable to have no children or families in B&B, in reality, if Andrew were sat here this morning, I know he'd be saying to you, we will try everything we can, but it is almost impossible to completely eradicate it. So setting yourselves with a target that almost certainly the council could not achieve, however much resource, Frank, you put into it, I think is wise. So again, we'll perhaps look at making sure that we've captured your aspiration around housing and homelessness, perhaps in a rather more coherent way than is in the current bullet point form.
Good, thank you. Does anybody else have anything else they want to bring into this point? Councillor Alford.
Yes, I just want to comment about the local transport plan, because the sound of it is bureaucratic, and I made a comment about the bureaucratic approach earlier on. And the fundamental reality in much of my ward is that people would be happy just to see a bus every now and again.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to comment? Now we shall move on then. We're on to driving economic growth, or would you prefer for that to become prosperity?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Right. Who might like to come in under this area? Councillor Fry.
Looking at the first paragraph, the council in partnership with BCP and Dorset have submitted a bid. Is that wording right there? Because it'll soon be out of date.
Perhaps, Councillor Flowers.
I think we haven't submitted a bid yet. I think we need to talk about being in dialogue. That because it is dialogue going on between the two councils, the LEP, and obviously with government as well. So it's a whole mix. So that would be more appropriate, I think, Chairman.
Can I say the same started on North Quay and the bowling alley sites in Weymouth? Is there more appropriate wording that could be looked around there? Is it development of various sites in Weymouth might be, or something like that? Because there will be others that come up.
Chairman, again, we can pick that up with Councillor Fry after this meeting, but I think Councillor Fry's comments are well made.
Councillor Jesperson.
Again, could we have just a little bit of tidying up? So we have the Dorset Education Board has been embedded. Could that go with the rest of the education ambitions here, so that again it tells the narrative? We have again got some confusion here where we're referencing funds and so on. So the Shared Prosperity Fund, you might need to think about how many of these need a footnote or something, because most people reading this will not know what the Shared Prosperity Fund is. And then what is the multiply plan, and why is that in inverted commas? Is that a different thing than? So we have some things that one in inverted commas, one just in lowercase, and one with uppercase at the beginning. So again, we just need to tidy this up and make sure it's obvious to anyone reading this what the multiply plan is, what the Shared Prosperity Investment Fund is, and so on. And I was being a little bit facetious about footnotes, because obviously we're not going to be doing that, but it's just a presentation matter. Thank you. But having said that, again, as with the last one, there's a lot in here. It's a good read.
Yes, thank you. John, did you want to come in?
Similar observation again, Chairman. I think this is another one where actually just the ordering it, as members identified this morning, will actually enable it to tell a narrative story. Just for members who may not be aware, because this is another new piece of the lexicon, multiplies Department for Education initiative to improve adult numeracy. And so again, I think Councillor Jesperson's comment is well made in relation to that and the whole plethora of announcements that have come out, particularly through the government's Levelling Up programme around additional funding and initiatives and so on. And I think again in this section we can perhaps weave that into a more coherent narrative, which will not only remind those who actually work on it how all these things actually come together, but I think also make that clearer for members and the public.
Councillor Jesperson, yeah.
Is there an overall point, and this is a bit of a hobby horse of mine in a good way, an overall point about this question of grant funding? Dorset Council at the moment punches above its weight, in my view, and I think this is demonstrable as well, above its weight in securing grant funding of all sorts all across the council. And so I'm not sure where this goes, but somewhere where we would put as an ambition that we would continue to do that in a measurable way, because it's a current success and I would like us to acknowledge that and to carry on doing that. So that might be in this section, it might be elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Chair. There's a few points here, and I might suggest that many of these headlines are rewritten and re-looked at there. There's some stuff. Coverage of superfan connectivity has risen from 96 to 97.2%. That's now. We're meant to be looking forward. The same goes for 2G coverage of A and B roads has increased from 42.6%. Again, we should be looking forward. What's it going to be in 2 years or 3 years' time? The Levelling Up Fund round 2 has been submitted. The multiply plan has been approved. The Shared Prosperity Fund investment plan is being delivered. Where does that go? The rural connectivity, we're looking at that as well there. So I think perhaps some of these headlines just need to be reworked, reworded, and it's a plan for the future, not a plan for the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jesperson.
What that wording is trying to demonstrate is that it's implicit but not stated, is what will success look like? And that's why it uses the word has. This has been done, this has been done, this has been achieved, and that's what success would look like. So perhaps we could put a phrase in that makes it clear this is what success will look like. And in that context, the word has does make sense, but I take your point. If you don't understand that that's what we're describing, then it looks a bit odd.
Perhaps in which case we start with a baseline. So everything starts with a baseline and then moving on to what success looks like. Councillor Haynes, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm actually meeting with Debs Friday, I think, this week. And what I propose is that I suggest you ask us to take this away and we'd get them a bit more aligned. And there are also some things in here sort of like maximising tourists. Well, we don't want to maximise them. We want to maximise the income from them because we don't need too many more at the moment. Thank you very much. They're very nice. But and also, I'm a little bit concerned about the ubiquitous full fibre because I don't think we're going to get full fibre to some of my rural communities ever. So I think we perhaps need to have a little look at some of the wording of it.
Thank you. Councillor Fry, your finger's hovering. Did you want to come back?
No, I think that some of the later points do cover it, and I pick up on those, but I think the ubiquitous full fibre 2028-2033 is a good target. We may not achieve it, but that's the sort of thing I see we should be having in this policy. And again, you've got to mention the Dorset public transport plan there, working on those. This is for the future, this plan. Thank you.
John.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a thought. I mean, obviously, the delivery plan has been a new initiative this time around, which I certainly welcome as an officer. It's a good discipline to be clear about what it is that as members, you're asking us to do. In terms of what might aid this, in terms of that subsequent presentation of the document, again, happy to work with Deb on the areas that I'm closest to. But that clarity between your strategic objectives, which we were discussing in the earlier part of the debate, and then the specific delivery actions that are going to make that thing implemented and manifest. And I think that kind of clearer line of sight in the presentation of the document between strategic intent and delivery action might well help, and I think just aid that understanding.
Deb, you weren't thinking of taking a holiday soon, were you?
Not just yet, no. And just sitting here, I've kind of realised why some of these things are in a bit of a jumble in this section, and so I do apologise for that, because what we've done is this was originally colour-coded depending on which sources we pooled these targets together from. So some of them were aspirational because they reflected directly from Councillor Flower's statement of intent. Some of them are more specific actions, and then some of them are pulled directly from various strategies. And so we do need to pull those together and put them into a logical order, and I apologise that hasn't happened for this time. But it is really helpful to have the feedback that having the specific targets rather than just the broad statements is welcomed. So if you can kind of allow me to apologise for the fact that they are in a bit of a jumble, but it was for a logical reason from the officer's point of view initially, and I will sort that out. So perhaps we might have a statement of the ambition and then the kind of targets underneath that, so that links back to the priority. So the key priority is this. That would mean we want to try and be ambitious and have ubiquitous full fibre, but we might not get there. So this is what we're going to do to enable that and present it back in that way.
No apology is needed. Councillors Flower only presented these. It wasn't that long ago. I think you've done a really good job, so do not worry. This is exactly what we're here for. It's a good talking shop, and I welcome everybody's input. Councillor Flower, did you want to come in?
Please. The last two bullet points, it talks about by 2033 create an additional 6 million GVA. We can't do that. And I think the word create is wrong. Create 9,600 additional full-time equivalent jobs in the economy. We can enable it. We can work with business to create it. We can create an environment where they can flourish and we get those extra jobs. But I just think it's a good piece of work here, but we just need to get the language right and get it in the tense that we intended it. I hear what Deb said, and and again, she doesn't need to apologise. because this needs to be fleshed out in such a way that it tells the story behind the headlines. I think that's what this is all about.
Councillor Bryan.
Yes, thank you. Picking up on what the leaders just said, I'd like to see something in here that highlights the success we have had with businesses in specific areas, and I'm going to mention Custom House Key as a prime one, where we've seen the seating arrangements to the outside of the property, which came about because of COVID and the pandemic, but that is that's there to stay. But what that has done is that's allowed those businesses to virtually double their seating capacity. That means more people are visiting Weymouth. There's a big risk that they'll go and buy a newspaper in Weymouth, they'll buy a bucket and spade in Weymouth. So it all has a knock-on effect. I'm very proud of the work we've done on Custom House Key, although we've taken some flack over it. I think the end result proves that we were right in what we did, and I'd like to see this somehow built into this, because we need to develop more and more with the business community, working with the business community, to provide opportunities for them to develop their businesses, which will bring about, it's good for the local economy, it's good for employment, and I think we've got a great message here that I'd like to see included if we can. Thank you.
Right, the outside seating area was just such a brilliant reactive response. We had one ourselves in Sturminster Newton, and it saved the bacon of many a business, because they were still able to serve drinks and sandwiches and all sorts, and people stopped and it stayed, and it's become a really super busy meeting place. And you know, we reacted straight away, which was just such a great thing to do. Councillor Flower.
There's an F there somewhere. I'm looking at the one by 2020. It's create vibrant towns through improvements to town planning. Bearing in mind the current crisis we're going to go through with the finance, the fuel and everything else like that, can we really make a vibrant town by 2026 with our planning? I would doubt whether we can achieve that in that time through that process. And the same goes for modernise our tourism offer. Other than what we've done with the outside seating, I'm not sure what else we can realistically do to attract more people here ourselves as a council.
We can drive a campaign and really make good use of our Visit Dorset website and so much more. So we should definitely be behind that. Councillor Jesperson?
I was just going to say, you said it, Madam Chair, it's that our tourism offer is principally around Visit Dorset, which is fantastic, but there's more we can do. I mean, it's got massive more potential. So you might want to make it explicit what we're talking about here. But yes, there is loads we can do on Visit Dorset, which is our tool.
Anybody else? Right. Our next bullet point is becoming a modern customer-focused council. I actually just wanted to start with just one thing. I'm not actually sure whether, Spence, you think this is us or people and health, but it is people and health more than... Well, it's sort of good. Because I wonder whether we can actually target ourselves with how long it actually takes for any person calling the council to speak to a human being, rather than press this for that, press that for that, and then there's no answer. And I just think that's the very, very first point of contact, when people just want to speak to a human being, and it can be so frustrating. Councillor Haynes.
I think we have actually been looking at, through the Transformation Board, the key performance indicators, and one of the ones we've had, it's not how fast they speak to a human being, it's whether the problem's solved when they get there, right? So how many people have their problem solved at first point of contact is what we want. And those are the sort of things that we're looking at. And they do already monitor the time it takes for the phone to ring before somebody actually gets to an operator. They do that already. But I think we just need to be a bit more specific about the way that we are looking to support. And I know Laura would say, but unfortunately she had to leave, she and I have been working really closely on this about how because it used to be my portfolio, so I started some and she's moved it on. So it's really, really important, those things. I quite agree with you. I think there are those sort of things aligned to our performance indicators is what we should be putting in here, because that's the detail that we'll be able to drill down into.
Thank you. Are you happy with that, Deborah, that we bring those in as two separate real metrics that we sit on and monitor? Councillor Jesperson?
I almost don't need to say it again, but again, we could rearrange them so that they tell a story, and then the story that I'm particularly interested in seeing here. So we have the one customer account, really, really important piece of work, which then goes on, well, the customer services help points, the one customer account, and then our records and information and data managed in a digital way, leading to my all-time favourite, data-informed decision-making. Could we put a little more meat on those and so that we actually know what we're measuring? Because for me, that's one of the most exciting things in the whole discussion this morning, for the potential it has for making us a better council. And so, yeah, can we big that up a bit, measure it, and put it in capital letters and starry lights, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to come in? Councillor Alford?
It's really sort of getting to the end of this, a kind of sweep-up comment. I made the comment earlier on about what the council would look like at the end of the plan period compared with now. And in some ways, it's a very similar point to Sherry's about what does success look like. And I think it's useful in this section to focus on the successes, what really matters to us in terms of our work. If we persist with all of these, and I can live with that, I think it's important to know that we have means of measuring the performance against each of these. And I think it's absolutely essential that there is that performance measurement system to cover everything. So I would look at some suitable stage for that confirmation. And then there is the monitoring itself, whether the data is available, say, on quarterly or shorter intervals. So it's the package that I'm interested in, rather than just the individual statements.
Deborah?
Yes, that's exactly the intention of providing such specific targets, both that they're measurable and that we can then see how they deliver the priorities. I think that there's a tiny bit of narrative missing between the plan and then just this list of targets. So I think that we can put that in to help bring it together. But absolutely, that would then go through performance monitoring, and I would expect then for the delivery plan here associated with the council plan to then go through not only to Cabinet, potentially to scrutiny committees to scrutinise the performance against what we've set out to deliver, and indeed through other internal monitoring processes we'd have as officers. So absolutely the intention of having these much more specific targets in this plan, as I think from ones we've done before, is to set up that performance management framework around it and to monitor our progress and give ourselves assurance of when we've delivered it. So getting very specific targets in here and then monitoring those going forward is exactly the intent.
Thank you. Have we ever worked with, or could we work with, or set up a residents panel where we monitor and survey them at various points so that they look at our new ways of working? Would that be something we could consider?
We can certainly look at ways of co-producing things, particularly around the customer account. That's definitely our intention. We've already had some feedback from customers, as we did, in fact, when we launched the new website. We had real customers give us some feedback on what that looks like, and that will be part of our design process. But we could look to do that on a more ongoing basis. I could link in with colleagues in comms to see what we could do there.
Thank you. Right, I see nobody else at this moment in time. We finished our delivery plan. So in which case, we actually sort of come back to our recommendations. Okay, I mean, Deborah, how were you thinking? There's obviously a lot of work you've got to do. Was this going to come back or just be tweaked and then go to Cabinet? I mean, where do you actually see this going? Should it come back to us or to anybody else, or what do you think?
The intention, Chair, if it's okay with you, was to take the comments on board today and then take it forward to the July Cabinet meeting. I've got quite extensive notes and I'm happy to share that draft with you and Councillor Fry on that route through.
Yeah, Councillor Haynes.
Yeah, Chairman, I just remind everybody that obviously there's still the opportunity at the Cabinet for members of the council to comment and for there to still be alterations at that stage. It's not really, you know, we could circulate this endlessly, and designing things by committee is always really difficult. So I think we perhaps need to see what the other overview committee has to say. Then Debs will do a complete revamp of what, and I'll work with her on that. And then it'll come to Cabinet, and at that point, I urge everybody to have another look. It will be different. It will be different from what you've got now, because we had to start somewhere. And this has now given us a really good feedback on what people are looking to see.
Okay, Councillor Flower.
Just on that point, actually, Jill, what you've done this morning is exactly what we wanted you to do, what we want the other overview committee to do. So when it arrives at Cabinet, it's had a good look at, good scrutiny. We use scrutiny in the broad sense here, having a really good look at what's here, and challenging the wording. So when Cabinet get it, it's going to be a lot tighter, a lot more focused, and it will give the Cabinet the opportunity, hopefully, to go, do you know what? This is absolutely what we were looking for. We've done a refresh of our Dorset plan. It says in here early on that it's making sure that the plan reflects the 10 key priorities that I announced back in May at Annual Council. And if we do all of that, we're up and running, aren't we? So you're doing absolutely the job that I hoped you would do, to be honest.
Well done, team. Well, in which case, I think the recommendation is we've said everything, we've done it. So if we're all happy with what we've done, we'll finish this item and we'll just go to item number 9 then, which is our forward plan, which I have to say is looking a little bit light. And I did wonder, I saw something, John, you might be able to answer this. I saw something on that there might be an enforcement policy in the making somewhere, whether that could be coming to a future meeting maybe. I think that there's not a lot on our plan at the moment.
Chairman, I haven't got a note on me this one about the enforcement. I'll check. Something is ringing a bell in the back of my mind. I can't answer that now. So rather than answer it not having the facts before me, I'll gather the facts and come back to you directly on the matter. But if I may, to assist you in that point, Councillor Mill and I would both like to raise with you, would you be willing to take a report on Redlands? Members, you and members of this committee will be aware following a very long, I think 2 years of discussions about the future of Redlands, we've come to a very satisfactory outcome, which seems to be agreeable both to the college, who are the current lessee, to Active Dorset, who come in as the new partner to the council, and to the community. And we have a paper which would be en route for a September Cabinet, but say Councillor and I would both like to bring that before this committee if you would wish to, and that would help you because it would be the 28th of July and that report is in a draft stage sufficient. I can be confident we could do that for you. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else, anything on the forward plan? Thank you. Item 10, urgent items. There are none. 11, exempt business. There is none. I close this meeting at 2 minutes past 12, I think. Thank you very much indeed.